Hey, how you doing this week, everybody? We are here on another Friday night, but we're not live. That's right. We pre-recorded this episode, but we're still probably with you in the chats. This week, it's going to be all about The Mandalorian Season 2. And it all begins right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, yeah, we're not live tonight.
No, man.
Hopefully our...
Is this live or Memorex?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. But it's actually been an interesting week this week. I mean, there's been a lot of Mandalorian Season 2 news.
Yeah, definitely, man. We definitely had to kind of give it its due because there's so much information coming out. And with it being like less than a month away at this time. A little bit more than, maybe like a little bit more than a month.
Yeah, it's a little over a month.
A little over a month, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's the 30th. So.
Right.
So, yeah, man, it's really exciting. There's a lot of stuff that's been coming out. And there's some questions that, you and I both have kind of had about this upcoming season, especially as it pertains to time. So, but I guess before we get into that.
Yeah, well, the thing about this, what we decided to do this week is just do a Mandalorian Season 2 centric episode, simply because there is just so much that's been coming out over the last even week.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just been a lot of stuff that's been coming out over the last week, and it's just like, man, there's just so much stuff. It's like, okay, well, I mean, we would have just been talking about this anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of needed its own thing anyway.
Yeah.
Just to deal with the
Exactly.
weight of everything.
And so since we had to pre-record this time, since we're not live this week, we thought, you know what? This is a good show to just let's get it all out of the way. So what we decided to do was we're just going to show you guys the trailer again at first so we can put everybody on the same page. Let's watch the trailer. Let's kind of refresh our memories if you guys haven't watched it like 1,000 times by now. But, let's just see where we're at, and then we're going to talk about all the big questions of what people have been saying. Here we go.
Show me the one whose safety deemed such destruction. You must reunite it with its own kind.
Where?
This you must determine. The songs of eons past tell of battles between Mandalore the Great and an order of sorcerers called Jedi.
You expect me to search the galaxy and deliver this creature to a race of enemy sorcerers?
This is the way.
You know this is no place for a child. Wherever I go, he goes. So I've heard. This is the way.
All right, so that was a pretty cool trailer once again. It's interesting when we've actually watched this thing for, I don't know, man, this must be like the third or fourth time I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
That every time I get something new out of it.
Yeah, I mean, even in the very beginning, like just looking at the Razor Crest, it looks damaged, like badly damaged. It's kind of like barely hanging on. The back flap is open and everything like that. And,
yeah, and I never noticed that before.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, it looks like it was like an intense battle at some point. It's like kind of barely hanging on, trying to make it to wherever. What looks like Earth actually in the background. Just hilarious.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, there's so many different there's like a bunch of different planets, a bunch of different elements, like all kinds of stuff that I've noticed about that. It looks like we're going to be going to a lot of different places this season.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that some of the cool things about it, of course, that ice planet, which I know we talked about before, might be Ilium.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fact that we see Tatooine again. So, you're kind of like, okay, why are we going back here?
Yeah, I got to think that that's a Boba Fett thing.
Yeah.
I have to.
That makes the most sense, honestly. And then, you have, I just love the voiceover, though, because you kind of don't know who that is. Is that the armorer or Bo-Katan, or is that someone else? Like,
well, and a lot of people thought the armor is Bo-Katan.
Exactly, right.
I don't think that could be the case, though, because, I don't know.
Well, that's the biggest thing about, The Mandalorian Season 2 is that although we know a lot, there's still so much we don't know. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why this is a good topic to kind of bring up and talk about this week. But like one major things that I wanted to kind of bring up was the fact of time, because you and I have often talked about, all right, how many episodes are we getting? How long are the episodes going to be? Are they going to be like the little 20-minute ones we've seen in the past, or are they going to be longer? And they're pretty much going to keep the same amount of episodes. But
yeah. We could get into this because that's one of the biggest issues that we had, I think, with the first season is the fact that it's like, I was really shocked when the first one was like, 20, 25 minutes or something. I'm like, really? They built up the show
mm-hmm.
and then they just, they give us like pretty much, it just seemed like when they were getting into it,
it was over.
Yeah, it was over.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, and then I was like, okay, maybe that was just because it was the first episode, it was a pilot or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then they were all like that.
Yeah, and the thing is, as I was doing some research, Favreau pretty much said that the episodes are going to vary in length. So there's no set time for these things. It's kind of like one could be 50-something minutes, another one could be like 48, another one could be 30. We just don't know. I guess it just depends on however long it takes to tell the story of that particular episode.
Well, and that's encouraging because I would like for it, even though there was a little bit of variety in the other one. There were a couple of 35, 40 minutes. I think the finale was even like 50 minutes or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's cool that you have that, but I do think that we need a little bit more length because, we've talked about this a lot where there's so many characters that they're introducing. There's just so much story they got to get through.
Well, not only that, but I'm also just thinking about, I just wish they had more continuity in that, just so you know what you're getting because, you kind of block out your time for that.
Mm-hmm.
If it's like, okay, a Mandalorian's coming on, okay, I know I need an hour, but, you don't know if it's 20 minutes or
yeah, no,
or
that's
what,
a good point.
And then the other thing I've been kind of wondering, and this is something that a few of my friends were kind of conversing about, and I didn't really think about it until we were actually having this conversation. But, we were often talking about like, okay, Ahsoka's supposed to be in this. We're getting Gina Carano's character is back in. So, everyone's saying that this is kind of setting up that whole all women's Star Wars.
Oh, yeah,
thing.
yeah. That thing that Kathleen Kennedy was trying to do.
Right. But it's not even so much that, but it makes me wonder, what is the actual purpose of the Mandalorian? So I'm asking that almost like a philosophical question, but like, okay, is the Mandalorian the show? One, is it a limited run show? Two, is it a show that's designed to have things come into it so they can branch off out of it?
Yeah, almost like the Mandalorian's kind of a central
like a
figure,
hub.
and like a hub, and then things come in and out, and
Yeah,
you can maybe even get new shows, a new series based on something.
exactly. Like, is that this purpose? And like I said, that's why I asked about the limited run, because even much like Kenobi, Kenobi is a limited run show. Now, granted, with the Mandalorian, we know that, okay, you can tell tons of stories out of this,
Right.
just given the landscape of it, but we don't know really what its true purpose is, because I don't think we've ever found out, like, okay, they've never said, like, okay, it's going to go for, 6 seasons or something like that. We're playing 6 seasons out of this show. They've talked about seasons 3 and 4 already, I believe.
Yep.
But, so we can kind of count on that for the most part. But like I said, what is the actual intent of The Mandalorian? Is it really to tell all these different stories, or is it more like, all right, the Mandalorian world is here, but then here's some other stories that's taking place while the Mandalorian is going on? So let's say, we're introduced to this whole situation with Baby Yoda, and we're trying to find him a home again. Well, once that's complete, do we follow the Mandalorian on another adventure, or do we kind of catch up with him later on? Even though it's called The Mandalorian, do we catch up with him somewhere else down the line?
Yeah, I don't know. Because, the thing that's a little bit interesting about that whole concept is that, yes, you have this whole Mandalorian as a central character, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they've been talking about, well, they've really been building him up. And they've been building him up as a singular character.
Mm-hmm.
He's like almost like it's in the Old West, and he's kind of like a
gunslinger.
Yeah, like a gunslinger kind of thing, and you get that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think, though, and again, this depends on what you mean by limited series. Because if we're talking about 4 and 5, is that really a limited series?
Well, this in 3 and 4. So, that could be limited. I guess.
Well, and I thought I heard something about a 5.
Oh, and that part I haven't heard.
Well, they were thinking about it. You're right that, okay, season 3, they're actually in the middle of doing.
Right. I know 3 is already in the making.
Yeah, 3's in the making. 4, they've been talking about, they've been writing it or something like that.
But as far as I've read, I heard it hasn't gone past 4, at least not yet.
Right.
So I guess that's kind of where I'm wondering, like, okay, how long of a span of time, or like, what's the ultimate, what's the end goal of The Mandalorian?
No, that actually makes sense, because you do have to look at what is the purpose. Is the purpose to create this character and to actually, okay, we're going to tell his story. We're going to then branch out in his story.
Mm-hmm.
Or is his purpose, like you said, almost like a conduit to where other people come in? Because, and this brings me to one of the things that I really wanted to talk about today, which is Tamira Morrison has been all but confirmed, because it was like a Showcast listing, or it's like some listing that Hollywood has that, it basically gives information on what people have signed on for and what they're doing and stuff. And they've listed him as Boba Fett in Mandalorian Season 2.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a done deal.
Right.
We know we're getting Boba Fett.
Yes.
So the question becomes, why? It's like I said last week. You can't really tell a Mandalorian story without Boba Fett and Sabine.
Yeah, especially Boba Fett. You could probably get away with Sabine.
Well, the problem is, though, that, we know that she's alive during this time period. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, but you just never know what she's doing, so you don't necessarily have to bring her in.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Here's the reason why I say you have to include Boba Fett.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that, because I'm really curious on why you would say you had to bring in Boba Fett and not Sabine. I would almost argue the opposite, actually.
Well, the reason why I would say you have to bring in Boba Fett, one, is because it's the closest to this time period. One, it's right after Return of the Jedi, and that's when we see him.
So, I give up.
So that's number one. But the other thing is, like, if you're talking about, like, when they announce Mandalorian, like, unless you're truly like a true Star Wars fan, when you're watching or you're reading all the content and watching all the different shows, you have no clue who Sabine Wren is. But you've seen the original trilogy, and the only one that looks remotely close to the Mandalorian is Boba Fett. Like,
that's true. There's probably a lot of people that think he is Boba Fett.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, that's why it would make the most sense to have Boba Fett versus Sabine, because Sabine is we only just come to know about her from Rebels.
Well, okay. So what I'm saying is, from a story perspective, in universe, we're talking the Star Wars story,
right?
Regardless of fan involvement and stuff like that. From that standpoint, I would make the argument that Sabine would be more important than Boba Fett, only because, number one, you don't necessarily have to say that he ever escaped from the Sarlacc pit.
Mm-hmm.
It's very possible that he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But even if he did, he's only a Mandalorian by the fact that he wears the armor. He's not
Correct.
actually a Mandalorian at all.
Mm-hmm.
Sabine, on the other hand, is, and if the Mandalorians are in hiding and they have this code and they're fighting, I mean, she should be front and center of that, just from what we know.
True, and for the most part, I agree with that. The only thing that I really say that really makes Sabine a true, or have true rights to being in this particular landscape is the dark. Once you introduce the Darksaber, yeah, you definitely have to talk about Sabine.
Well, and that's the other thing. I wasn't even going to bring that into it, but that to me seals the deal.
See, that was the only thing for me, because if you really think about it, like, once again, going back to Boba Fett, you still have Jango Fett. So like, okay, the whole Clone Wars was predicated off his design, of his genetic makeup, and then we knew he had an unaltered clone, of course. Some stories is like, well, that was his actual biological son. So, you have, so the Fetts are actually, and then of course the Fetts have a rich history with the Mandalorians because of their nefarious ways of stealing the Mandalorian armor, and they weren't true Mandalorians, yet they were carrying themselves almost as such.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, I can understand why Boba Fett would be more of a adversary to this current Mandalorian, especially if he's truly a Mandalorian. Somebody like Boba Fett walking around, it's like you're perpetrating. It's almost like someone wearing gang colors and you're not affiliated. That's like, wait, excuse me, what are you doing wearing our armor?
Well, and that's where it gets really interesting, and that's what I was actually thinking about when they were announcing that they were bringing him into season 2, or at least when it was rumored.
Sure.
Is the fact that, yeah, you have this whole thing to where you have this guy. It actually changes the whole nature of the Boba Fett storyline, because before we knew he was a bounty hunter along with Bosk and IG-88 and all those guys.
Right.
And he was obviously one of Jabba's main guys because he's always seen right there next to Jabba. And we almost looked at him like Han Solo's main adversary in the, bounty hunter smuggler type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now you actually have a whole different spin on this thing, because now, yeah, it's like you said, you have this pretender running around. Now, first of all, the Mandalorians have had to go underground because the Empire is, I don't know, either hunting them down or whatever. So it's forced them to go into hiding.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're underground. They're being rooted out by the Empire. And they're forced to move, their base of operations or whatever. Well, now you got this guy Boba Fett running around, assuming, obviously, that he's gotten out of the Sarlacc pit. And you got to wonder what the dynamics are, because, first of all, we know that Boba actually worked for the Empire on numerous occasions. Yeah. So you got to wonder now, with the remnants of the Empire, does he have any affiliation with them?
Yeah, and the other part about it is, and we don't honestly know, like, where the men or Din Djarin truly comes from.
Right.
Because he was in hiding. His parents were killed during that whole battle. The Mandalorians found him, and he became a foundling, and then they kind of just trained him as a Mandalorian. So now
that's true. You can
now
make
you
the
have,
argument he's not even a
I was
true
about to say,
Mandalorian,
exactly,
really.
and that's where I'm going with it, because like it's now like a birthright type thing.
So do you think that Boba was actually kind of became a foundling?
His story could, and that's what I'm saying. Like with this particular dynamic, I think that's what's going to be really cool about this season, is because if you bring Boba Fett in, since they're bringing Boba Fett in, now you have to really kind of tell the story of the Fetts, one, and then two, because you got to talk about Jango and Boba at this point, and then on top of that, okay, now we have to get into Din Djarin's character just as much as Baby Yoda's, because I think this season is really truly going to be about, okay, where does everybody come from? Because now you have, in theory, you got Sabine Wren, you still got Boba Fett. We still got to figure out, okay, where did the Fett clan play into this whole siege of Mandalore and all that type of stuff? Where was Sabine Wren at that time? Where's Din Djarin? Like, okay, is he a foundling or was he a birthright Mandalorian? And so then you still have to figure out Baby Yoda's lineage and where does he come from? So I think, and then now, and if they bring up in our, which we will talk about a little bit later, but now you bring in Ahsoka into the mix, okay, well, we know about her, but like, where has she been all this time? So I think the main focus for the most part, and honestly, I think we're probably not going to get Ahsoka until it's probably towards the end of the series, of the other season.
Yeah.
But I think it's really going to heavily focus on Boba Fett and Sabine and Moth Gideon.
Well, that actually brings up a good point too. Where do you think we're going to start in the season?
Like it's like when like episode 1, like where
exactly. Like first of all, how much time do you think has passed? And depending on that, where do you think? Because you make a good point. Ahsoka does seem like she would make more sense later in the season, or at the very least midway through the season.
Right.
But then that begs the question: where are they going to be? Before that?
Because if it's last season was 8 episodes, correct?
Yeah.
So
anybody that's chatting with us right now, you can correct us if we're wrong. But I'm pretty sure, I think it's 8 episodes.
Yeah, I wish they did 10. Honestly,
I know
it needed 10, in my opinion, but
it needed 22.
It needed the third act, but but no.
I mean, I do kind of like the whole limited series aspect. Well, or even limited season.
Mm-hmm.
Because for all we know, this thing could go like 10 seasons, but it might be only 8 episodes a season. I don't necessarily mind that because in a way it does feel more like a big movie.
Well,
on the other hand, I agree. I think 10 episodes would have been the sweet spot for season 1.
Especially if you're going to have varying lengths of time. See, that's my whole point. Like, okay, if you're going to, like, once again, this I was using, Game of Thrones as a reference, but like Game of Thrones, okay, that you had 10 episodes that made up a season, but each episode was an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, basically you got a 10-hour season. Okay, I can hang with that, but it's like, okay, if you're giving me 20 minutes here, and you're piecemealing, and then on top of that, I have not as many episodes. Now it's like, okay, well, dang, I'm getting shortchanged on both sides.
Yeah.
So I feel like if we at least gave us 10 episodes, okay, well, at least now you have more to chew on, I guess.
Well, it's one of those situations where I think, they have like this whole...
And especially bringing in all these
vast,
people.
Yeah, they're bringing in a bunch of people. And this is actually somewhat true even for season 1.
Yeah.
There was not a shortage of characters in season 1.
But see, here's the thing. Here's the difference about season 2. Season 2, you're dealing with very pivotal people. Like, okay, you got the Ugnaught, Nick Nolte's character.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he was cool, don't get me wrong, but he really wasn't like, he was never designed to be, the front person. Grief Karga. Okay, we kind of get he's a supporting character. Got you. Gina Serrano's character, Cara Dune. Once again, support character. You can kind of tell that. I get it. But when you're talking about season 2, and you're talking about, okay, we have the Mandalorian, who we don't know a whole lot about. We have Baby Yoda, who we don't know a whole lot about. Now you're bringing in Boba Fett, who we still don't know a whole lot about. Now you're bringing in Sabine Wren, who we do know a lot about, but to the casual fan, may not know.
Or, to your point, we don't know a lot about during this time period.
During this time period, correct. And then here's another big one that we left off the map the first time, but you got Moth Gideon. Like, where does he factor in all of this? Because this guy's wielding a dark saber. He's like this. He's obviously the bad guy in this. So, and in their description, they said, Moff Gideon's hunting down the Mandalorian. So, once again, you have like, okay, we need to figure out all these different elements and where are these people coming from, and what's their ultimate goal, or what's their purpose, so to speak. And you're only giving us 8 episodes with varying time lengths. So that's why I said, at least give us 10.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And, I'll even go one further. You got the Mandalorian character himself.
Yeah, that was the first one I said. I was like, the Mandalorian with
Yeah,
Din
because
Djarin,
he's the guy that I think really, honestly, they haven't focused a whole lot on his story.
No.
They've given us little tidbits. Sure, they've given us flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, he's trying to pretty much find his place in the Mandalorian culture, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
But he kind of has one foot in being a loner and one foot as being part of this bigger group.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe they're going to explore that a little bit more this season. At least that's what I hope. But again, it's kind of like you said, they got a lot they have to try to do in 8 episodes, if that's what it's going to be. Now, do we ever really get any kind of a confirmation on how many episodes we're getting this season?
Well, they said it's going to be the same as season 1.
Really?
Yep.
Okay, because I did catch the whole point about, we're going to get, like, varying lengths of episodes, which that would be cool. I just hope that they do more on the whole...
Well, I hope it's on the longer side. If they're going to do varying lengths, let it be like, okay, maybe hour and 15 versus an hour versus 45 versus
right
on the lower end, like, oh, we got a 15-minute episode.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It's like, dude, you guys barely got past the
credits.
The credits.
Yeah.
Especially when you stop and consider that there's just so much story that you can tell in this show. I mean, it'd be one thing if they created an environment or whatever that really wasn't that fascinating in and of itself, but I guess it does its job in the sense of it does leave you wanting more.
Yeah, so here's the actual article. It says, many things will undoubtedly change when Season 2 of The Mandalorian premieres on October 30th. One constant is the episode length. Much like Season 1, Season 2 will consist of 8 episodes. However, series creator Jon Favreau said that the episodes will vary in length. There's probably even variation in episode lengths this year.
Okay, well, that part of it's good because it did... I think it actually leaned a lot more toward the shorter side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we got a couple, I think we got 1 or 2 that were like 40, and then of course the season finale was like 50 minutes or something. But I mean, for the most part, it was like 25 to 32.
And even if it's a 40-minute episode.
Well, a 40-minute if you think about it. So like 44 minutes, I think, is what a network hour show would be without commercials.
Yep.
Yeah, give us that.
Exactly.
Give us that. But I do think that it's really interesting, though, that they're bringing Boba Fett in and that they're making kind of a big deal about it. Even though, again, the trailer, we just saw the trailer, well, like half hour ago. But we saw the trailer, and they didn't really show too much. Now, somebody did, I remember on YouTube, watching them go through, like, one of those frame-by-frame things, and they're like, oh, look, on the speeder bike, there's, like, his helmet and like his armor or something. And it's like, okay, maybe.
Yeah.
But then again, maybe not.
Now, let me ask you this question. Do you think that we're going to get another trailer for Mandalorian? And if so, do you think they're actually going to show Boba Fett?
I do think we're going to get another trailer. I almost think we have to. Again, they could technically, I guess, leave it at this. I mean, look at how long it took us to give us this.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that we're going to get another trailer, and I do think that it's going to be, it's funny. We just watched this one, but what was it, like a minute and a half or something?
Oh, yeah, thereabouts.
If they gave us like a full 2.5-minute trailer, but I think they're going to do it like right before it premieres because they want to get everybody excited about it. And I also think that you're going to get a lot of, maybe you'll get some TV spots. That would be cool. Because remember, Disney wants to drum up their subscription to Disney Plus. That's another thing that this whole thing was designed to do.
Right.
It was actually the first original show to debut on Disney Plus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
I mean, they did have a handful of like some Marvel shows and stuff like that, but I think The Mandalorian was the first made specifically for Disney Plus. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But and the thing about it is, and it did exactly what it was designed to do. Everybody signed up for it, and a lot of people, much to my surprise, have not really canceled it. When the whole Cobra Kai thing came out at the time it was YouTube Red, then it became YouTube Premium. We know it's on Netflix now, but at the time, the only way that you could see Cobra Kai was on YouTube Premium. And so naturally what people would do is they would sign up for it for a month of the free trial or whatever, binge watch all the episodes, and then cancel it. People aren't necessarily doing that with Disney Plus. Now, granted, it has all the Star Wars movies, all the Marvel movies, of course, the Disney movies.
Yeah, I think the reason why people don't do that is because Disney's content is is well beloved by so many.
Yeah, it's strong enough.
Yeah, it is. It's really. It's the catalog is what makes Disney Plus so awesome. Is because it has either stuff that you grew up on if you were like a kid and like, oh look, The Little Mermaid, or something like that. And then of course if you have kids, they want to watch stuff on there. And then on top of that, yeah, I mean, two of the biggest franchises, Star Wars and Marvel, alone. I mean, that just drums up everybody.
Yeah, and that's my point, is the fact that you do have a built-in audience for this. It isn't like like a YouTube Premium kind of thing, where honestly one of the reasons why I've kept it all this time is because you don't get any commercials, no ads, no nothing, and I am so used to that. I mean, I've gone into some of my other accounts where I don't have that, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I got to see another ad.
Yeah,
this is insane. It drives me nuts. I'm like, how do people watch YouTube like this?
Well, it's just kind of like how once you get Amazon Prime, it's like, okay,
that's true. It's
like
another
free
one.
shipping. It's like,
sure, yeah. How many times do people? It's funny because everybody will talk about the movies and all that. I'm like, yeah, that's great, but that's not the primary reason that I signed up for it. The main reason was the free shipping.
Yeah.
And it's free like 2 days, in some cases like same day or next day.
Yeah.
But hey, don't get me wrong, the movies are great. But that's the whole idea. So I do think, though, that they still want to drum up a lot of subscriptions and stuff like that. So they might actually show TV spots. I don't know. But conspicuously absent was Boba Fett. And then, of course, the next person that we should probably talk about, Ahsoka Tano.
Yes.
So there's been a lot of talk lately about the idea that there's a possibility that Ahsoka could end up being a disappointment.
Well, here's one of the funny things about, like, I was hearing so much that the reason why the reason why the trailer took so long to be released was because they were trying to do shots for Ahsoka. But then, she's not in the trailer.
Well, yeah, and then, of course, you heard that they were actually trying to edit the thing to not give you too much information. See, again, we would really have to know how many episodes is she in? How long is she in per episode? It's one of those things that, look at Moth Gideon. He's not really in it a whole lot. And he didn't actually come in until later in the, the last couple episodes or something?
Right. He came in, maybe the last...
I think it was the last...
3.
Yeah, at most.
Because they had that standoff.
Right, they had the standoff.
That's initially, and then that's when Din Djarin finally took off the helmet because they set the place on fire, and Baby Yoda used the Force and kind of blocked the flames.
Well, and I think what it was like somewhere in between that. I think they had that Siege episode, or it was something like that. But yeah, it was either in the last 2 or the last 3. So they saved him for last, and of course he had this great impact, and of course it set him up for season 3. So it really makes you wonder, when these fans are talking about this big disappointment and stuff, I understand from what I've read, but I honestly think that the Ahsoka angle is really going to come later in the season, like you said initially, and I think it might be setting her up to be like the main character of season 3, much like how Moff Gideon seems to be a focal character in season 2. Now, granted, that remains to be seen because we don't even know how long these guys are going to be in it. You know what I mean? But it...
Yeah. Here's my thing. Here's what I think might happen. This is my speculation.
Well, that's all we can do right now, right? It's not like we could just
call up
put
Kathleen,
on season... yeah.
Hey, what you guys got going on for season 2? No, I honestly think that, it's going to focus more so on Boba Fett and the Mandalorian initially. Well, I think it's going to kind of start off with them trying to find Baby Yoda's home, and I think in the process of that, that's when they're going to run into Boba Fett.
But you know what would be interesting? What if the Empire hires Boba Fett to hunt down the Mandalorian?
Well, I was about to say I could see that, and I think that's kind of where I was kind of going with some things because, all right, you have the Mandalorian. I think we're going to see Boba Fett kind of emerge or somehow come out of the Sarlacc pit. He's got to try to find his bearings and whatnot. Gideon is probably going to hire Boba Fett to he's like, all right, you know what? In order to catch a Mandalorian, you got to get a Mandalorian. So makes sense.
Kind of sounds like something he might say too.
Yeah. And so then it's
Here,
like,
have this Darksaber.
So then I think, that comes into play. And then so you have now you have the Mandalorian versus Boba Fett and that whole exchange for probably a couple of episodes. And then I think towards the end it's going to come down to, all right, maybe Boba Fett failed and Gideon is like, all right, screw it, I'll do it myself. Mm-hmm. And at that point, he's got this whole Darksaber that Sabine kind of finds out that she's been looking for it and find out it's in his possession. And she enlists the help of Ahsoka to kind of deal with him. And I think that's where we're going to get that big lightsaber battle that they were talking about.
And it could very well be.
That probably could be the end.
I mean, that sounds like it's a very plausible thing. The only thing that I'm confused about is, remember how they said that there was another actor that was also cast as Boba Fett as well?
Mm-hmm.
Who is that? I keep forgetting who it is. And we don't even know what Timothy Oliphant's character is either.
Right. But I think he's probably
Michael Biehn.
Michael Biehn. But I think they're probably going to be either
kind of like the Nick Nolte type characters, like people
either that or maybe former Imperials, because you still got them running around.
Yeah, that could be. It's just really weird, because when you really stop back and think, this is why I say these are all the big questions that we have. And, hopefully you guys are chiming in with the chats, and we're probably having a whole nother conversation in addition to what's happening here. Right. And again, if you guys are seeing some or whatever, hit us up in the comments section. We have a lot of really great discussions in the comments section. I want to welcome the new subscribers. Figure I might as well do this now and, take a little break. Welcome to the new subscribers. Welcome to, people that are checking this out for the first time, maybe. If you like what you see so far. Again, this is a little bit of a different episode than what we usually do, but hey, maybe you guys want to see us do more of these single topic shows. I don't know. If you do, let us know in the comments section. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And, we look forward to talking to you guys either live when we do it every Friday at 8 or in the comments section. But I think what's interesting about this is that when you actually look at the whole Boba Fett situation specifically, you have a case where there were two actors that were announced to play. Now, we know that Tamira Morrison, well, now we really know that he's been signed on to do it. But, of course, he makes sense because he played Django. So It would make sense that he would be the adult Boba, even though there were rumors that Daniel Logan was actually going to reprise his role. Mm-hmm. And he did voice Boba Fett in the Clone Wars series. So that part I always thought was kind of cool. But obviously that didn't end up being true. Now, they did cast somebody else to be Boba Fett, and the idea behind that was, in the Aftermath trilogy, there was a guy that somehow obtained Boba Fett's armor. And I don't know if he was actually masquerading as him or not, but there were rumors that maybe that's what this guy was going to be. Was going to be that character.
Yeah, I can see that. You can have someone maybe the sort of spit up the armor or something like that, or
yeah, right.
Boba Fett kind of got out of, maybe he barely made it out of the Sarlacc pit and he had to ditch the armor because, for whatever reason, maybe had stomach acid or something, I don't know. But then this guy's kind of find it, all right, I'm gonna just run around and play Boba Fett, and then Boba Fett kind of realizes hey, now and that it could just be Tamira Morrison just comes out of the Sarlacc pit. And that's all we see of him, and that could be it.
That would be hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like you make this big deal about Boba Fett being there, and it's just he just crawls out of the Sarlacc pit, and that's it for him.
Well, no, I'm just saying not it for the character Boba Fett, just yeah, he just comes out and you see him. It's okay, yeah, just to make that to have that continuity.
Oh, you're talking about almost like how Pedro Pascal wasn't always in the suit, kind of a thing, and so maybe this other actor is the suit guy.
Yeah, so then maybe he's
Tamira Morrison is
he comes out of the Sarlacc, he ditches the suit, or takes the suit off and you see it's Tamira Morrison. It's like, oh yeah, that's the original, that's
could,
Django.
Yeah, that could
but
be.
But then later on, it's like, okay, the other guy is actually in the suit and he's running around as Boba Fett.
You never really know because they've been so ambiguous about some of this stuff that you really don't know. And I think it's interesting that on
he
one
could
hand,
sell the armor.
Well, yeah.
He could be like, you know what? Screw it. This whole bounty hunter thing, like almost like eaten alive by the stupid Sarlacc thing. I'm over it. And he leaves and he sells it or whatever to get off the planet. Some guy buys the armor and now he's running around as the new Boba Fett.
I'm really curious about it too.
I mean, there's so many ways you can go with it.
Well, the thing that's interesting, especially since it's close enough, I almost want to watch this episode after we see the first episode of, of the thing, just to
see if we were right or
how far off we were or whatever. Because it's funny how I ended up catching one of our episodes where we were talking about Rise of Skywalker speculation.
Oh yeah, and some of our stuff
actually ended up being true, and then of course other stuff was like
way off.
Not. But the thing that is interesting about this to me is that you have a situation where we probably know all this information, because if you remember in season 1, we knew nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You had a few images, a couple of set pieces, something like that. Knew nothing about this new world.
Right.
Yet now we know all this stuff,
now
and then we have
experts.
season 1. Yeah, but here's the thing that's funny. We're just as in the dark about season 2 as we were season 1, yet we have all this information.
Yeah, man, and that's one of the other things too that I was also reading about the script and everything for this show. It says they're keeping it tight-lipped like they were with Rise of Skywalker. Like only the actors get the stuff for their particular scenes that particular day.
Oh man, see,
they're doing that again,
and it makes you wonder. Then, what are they hiding? Like, what is the what is the Baby Yoda moment of this season?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, we've already heard, Giancarlo Esposito talk about, okay, yeah, there's going to be some battles. There's going to be like some fight sequences and stuff like that. More likely with the Darksaber. So, okay. Now we know that Ahsoka is going to be in it because, they pretty much confirmed that. So, you kind of have to wonder, like, okay, well, how does this end? And we've always, that's always a speculation that Luke is going to pop up at some point towards the end of this.
Do you really think that's the case, though? I mean, if you had to do an over-under thing,
I could see it. I could see them doing it.
I'm gonna say 40%. Over/under 40%.
I could roll with that. Simply because I could see them using Luke just almost like as a continuity hinge point.
Well, let's do 40%. So you think over 40% chance that he's in, or under 40% chance he's in? Jason will appreciate this one.
I know, right?
The percentages.
Yes. Must have like a statistics major or something in college.
Could be.
I will say it's probably under 40%.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with that too.
Go under 40.
Yeah, because, I mean, if I actually had to just guess, I would say like 20-some, maybe like 25% chance.
Yeah.
I could see it happen.
I could see it happening. Only just as, like I said, as a hinge point. Like, I don't think there's going to be any focus on him. I just think you just need to, because like I said, just given the landscape and the time frame of when all this stuff is going on, you got to wonder if Luke has heard or any, about any of the stuff that's going on.
That's noted.
Mm-hmm.
How about this? What are the chances? What percentage chance do you give that they mention his name? Not that Luke is in it, but his name is mentioned.
Oh, I think his name is probably, I'm about 85% certain that his name, because especially when you start bringing up like, okay, this whole race or this group of sorcerers called Jedi, once you start bringing up Jedi.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to go to. It's like, who's there of the Jedi? I mean, Luke is the Jedi at that point.
Exactly.
Now, what's going to be interesting, because we know Ahsoka's floating around there,
mm-hmm.
and we know that Ezra's somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably still with Thrawn in the unknown regions. We don't actually know. But what's interesting to me is that up until very recently, we've been led to believe that Luke is the only Jedi, right? That, Yoda and Obi-Wan kind of hung around. They trained him. And then Luke is this sole Jedi that is now going to single-handedly rebuild the Order. But as time has gone on and we've had more Star Wars-based series, we now see that there's actually some people that survived Order 66 even through the original trilogy. So Luke technically isn't alone.
Yeah, I mean, but I think, and once again, I think you have to look at it from the standpoint of kind of no different than Ahsoka. It's like, okay, once you have that whole purge thing going on, everybody kind of just went underground. I mean, granted, she went underground just because she was banished from the temple, so she kind of just
she's a different case.
She's a different case in a way, but what I'm saying is a lot of Jedi, because if you remember in Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan did get a chance. Obi-Wan and Yoda, that's why they went back into the temple to send out that distress call to stay away and to go into hiding to any Jedi who were out there to hide, because they knew that, okay, the moment you're spotted as a Jedi, these clone troopers are everywhere. They're all across the galaxy. It's not like they're just on Coruscant. I mean, they're everywhere. So, you have those Jedi have to then now go into hiding. And of course, so now you have this whole tyrannical. I mean, that's why you didn't see any of them, pop up in, the original trilogy.
Well, right. But this is all retconning, though, because up until those stories were told, there wasn't anybody. I mean, Lucas didn't come up with this stuff until the Clone Wars series.
Right.
Because what happened is he introduced all these characters in the Clone Wars series, and arguably even, in the movies, everybody was pretty much wiped out, other than Obi-Wan and Yoda. But then when the Clone Wars series happened, and then eventually Rebels, it's like, well, wait a minute. No, some of these guys actually, not many of them, mind you, but a few of them.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you got, like, Kanan because he survived.
Well, until...
Well, I mean, yeah. But I mean, like, he survived the purge is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like,
he did technically survive the... Well, yeah, he did. He survived the purge. And, of course, even, what's a game? Jedi Fallen Order. Right? There's that Padawan that essentially survived. So you do have a handful of the ones that survived the purge. But what I'm not focusing on those guys. I'm focusing on the ones that were confirmed to survive into the original trilogy. That's the retcon part. Because up until then, we're led to believe that Luke is kind of like the New Hope. He's like the first Jedi to come during this time period, and now he's going to rebuild the Jedi Order.
Well, yeah, he's the first one to announce, but I think you could stand the reason that, there's other people out there. They just...
Well, now that we have all these expanded stories, you can.
Well, yeah.
But before you didn't. That's my point.
Before when?
Well, before Clone Wars, before Rebels, before any of that stuff.
Right.
There was no reason to. I mean, even the expanded universe didn't cover that. The expanded universe basically said, okay, Luke reestablished the Jedi Temple. He then trained a lot of these guys that he found who were Force sensitive. And then, of course, now you have a bunch of these guys. And, like Kip Duran is one that I keep going to. He was kind of like the most that was at least a challenge to Luke.
Yeah.
And he was almost like the senior member of the team under Luke. So you had that kind of a thing going. But now you actually had these people that, Ahsoka, I mean, she's a Clone Wars person. So you have people that technically survived a while. And so it's going to change the dynamic of how Luke is going to rebuild the temple and just the whole, the characterization of Luke and what he does after, obviously, he defeats Vader and Palpatine.
And you also got to think about, too, like, okay, if Ahsoka comes in, like, how old is she?
That's the thing.
Because it's like, you really think about, like, okay, when we get to Rebels, you can just tell there's a huge jump between, like, when we last see her in Clone Wars, even season 7 of Clone Wars, till, like, the last time we see her dueling Vader in Rebels.
Well, and the thing that is interesting to me, and this could almost become an eventual duel of the fates, but you have to wonder who's more powerful at the time of this post-Return of the Jedi period, Luke or Ahsoka. Because Ahsoka is pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And she was, of course, Anakin's direct apprentice.
True.
And she's very strong in the Force. Now, again, of course, you have Luke, as we all know, is Anakin's kid and a direct descendant of the Force and all this stuff. But Luke is not a Jedi Master yet. Like a Jedi Grandmaster, I should say.
Well, no, he's not a Grandmaster.
He's not even really he's kind of almost like a Master probably by the time of, certainly maybe by the time of The Mandalorian, you could say.
Yeah, he's definitely, but see, I think he's definitely a knight.
Oh, yeah, he's without question.
But I think that, just by the sole fact that he defeated Vader just makes him a knight.
Right.
But I think...
Because, he wasn't even really, that was like his thing. That was sort of like his Jedi trial, was he had to defeat Vader.
Right, in order to be...
And Palpatine to even be a knight, much less a master. He's not a master for a while.
Well, and that's what it just depends on... See, and that's one of the things, too, because you have to look at Luke in this perspective of, okay, when we see him in Return of the Jedi, he's powerful. He's grown a lot since Empire.
Yeah.
So, just the fact of his control, his mastery of the Force, just how he's able to do things a lot easily, a lot more easily. So, walking in, choking Gamorrean guards with like a wave of his hand. The fact that he's able to, he was able to lift 3PO up and move him around and do all that kind of stuff. And
okay, so basically what you're saying is, okay, and this is only like a couple of years after Empire, so it would stand to reason that 5 years after Return of the Jedi, if he keeps going on that trajectory and he keeps exponentially doubling in power, let's say.
Yeah, and especially I think once he's able to like... It's kind of like working out, and you and I have often compared, the Force to like working out. It's like when you first kind of started off, like it's daunting, it's hard, it's difficult. But once you kind of get used to your body changing and understanding how to, maneuver in the gym and now you're starting to eat right, you're changing everything. It's like you get to a point when you first start in the gym, you're still eating cheeseburgers and fries and everything like that. But it's until you get to a certain point where you dial in and you get real serious about it. Now you clean up your eating. Now you're seeing your body change exponentially because you brought the other part with it. And I think that's where Luke is. Luke always had ambition, just like Yoda always said. He's like, oh, I have the Force. And he's like, but you can't control it. Like you have the power, like you're powerful, but you can't control it yet. And so that's now Luke is actually gotten to the point in Return of the Jedi where he actually has control.
He's learning to control it.
So now when you look at it from the standpoint, he's been trained by Yoda firsthand, and now he's probably has the Jedi text, and he's probably been back to Dagobah and found some old Yoda books and stuff like that. Some
Yoda books.
Some coloring books or something. Yoda was
pop-ups.
So, like, now it's like, okay, now with him reading that stuff, like I said, with no Empire to fight, he's got nothing but time.
Yeah, it's funny. When you actually compare it to the working out analogy, that's really spot on, although I have to say, yeah, right? I have to say, though, that, I'm more like Last Jedi Luke when it comes to working out, right? I've cut myself off from from the Force. I've cut myself off from the gym, you know. I definitely had to get back into that. But yeah, I think it's one of those things that it's where Luke probably, once the events of Return of the Jedi are done. Now again, we don't really know what's happened between Return of the Jedi and The Mandalorian for Luke either.
Right.
Well, actually, we don't. For Luke, we don't even know really up until The Force Awakens. But we don't know. We assume he has nothing but time. But we don't really know that because we don't know what he's had to do to help build the Republic. We just don't have that information yet.
Well, I would say at that time, there's probably, at least up until Mandalorian, you probably safe to say that there's not a big enough threat like Palpatine or Vader.
Not even a threat. It could be something as simple as just helping to rebuild the Republic. He's trying to establish the new Jedi Order.
Yeah, but within this establishing, he's got to learn, like, okay, well, how do I do this? What is the Jedi Order even consider? He wasn't around, so he's got to even figure out the structure of it. But just in that learning, he's learning so much about the Force and the Jedi in and of itself, because that's his goal. If his goal is to say, like, all right, I'm going to open a business or something like that, well, guess what? You're going to start learning more about business by doing business.
Well, here's the thing that's interesting, though. And it actually brings up something that I remember kind of from the last season, because they said, okay, they were talking about these enemy sorcerers or whatever, and it was almost like, oh, I have to go, see them or face them or whatever. It's like, okay, it just dawned on me, who's he talking about? Or who are they talking about? Because there's only Luke, really. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like it almost implies that there's actually a new group of Jedi out there somewhere.
Well, no, I think what he was saying was, or the person was saying, is like, okay, at that time, because if you were,
they said he has to go, I don't know, visit them or face them or.
Yeah, no, I think it was something to the effect of like, you got to you got to go face them, but it's not. I think that's where Luke comes in at. I think, or
that's my point. It's either going to be a group of Jedi that we did not know survive. Well, Ahsoka would stand a reason, but people like that, or it would be maybe Luke's burgeoning Jedi Order.
Well, I don't think the Jedi. I mean, it could be, but
5 years after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, I guess you could.
And the whole thing. And you brought this up before too. Because one of the things that you had said, I don't remember if it was during our season 1 review or if we were just talking about The Mandalorian in general, but you brought up the fact that one of the reasons why the Empire might be obsessed with the whole Baby Yoda character in the first place is because if Luke started actually training all these Jedi and he's rebuilding the Jedi Order, and then they discover that there's this Force-sensitive species that they knew Yoda had belonged to, then it would make them want to tap into this to counteract maybe what Luke was doing. And that made a lot of sense to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I always say Gideon is probably, because see, when you look at Gideon, he's old enough to be in the Clone War era.
Yeah. Oh, without question.
He's old enough. So he probably remembers Yoda. And so to see something that's like, oh, wait, that's another creature that looks like that super powerful Jedi Master. And if he kind of does his research and kind of realizes like, oh, this particular species is strong with the Force and everything like that. See, that's what I'm saying. I think Gideon is really like way smarter than a lot of people, and I think people are really going to see like, okay, he remembers a lot of this. So that's why the Darksaber was like cool to him. He's like, oh yeah, I got to get that because.
Well, here's a question for you then. Because this is something that I've been wrestling with too, is the fact that first it was Werner Herzog's character. I can't remember the name of the character, but at first it's like, okay, Mandalorian's being paid to get Baby Yoda for this guy. And by some of the trailers and, some of the extended scenes that were leaked at first and then became part of the official trailer cycle, you're led to believe that he's the guy that, is actually trying to get Baby Yoda. Then you find out, no, he's just sort of brokering the deal.
Right.
And then there's this doctor that comes in. Well, then you find out that the doctor's actually trying to help Baby Yoda. So the guy that's actually trying to get him doesn't get him. So then you're going, okay, who is the one who commissioned for this creature to be kidnapped? Okay, now Moff Gideon comes along. So now you're really led to believe that, okay, he's either the guy or he's working for the guy. And so you would have to wonder then if he's working for the guy who's powerful enough. And of course, when he busted out with the Darksaber, nobody saw that coming.
No one.
I mean, that was just like one of the biggest
reveals.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest. That's right up there to me with Baby Yoda, actually.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially for hardcore fans. Yeah. Especially a live version of the Darksaber. That was sweet.
Exactly. And it was amazing that they made it pretty much look the same as they did in the animation.
I was just about to say that. Now, what if it's Thrawn?
Well, I thought of that too. I thought, it could be Thrawn because here's the couple of things that it could be. There's some that have speculated that we're going to get a little bit of a window into Palpatine's grand plan. That, of course, we see come to fruition as the final order in The Rise of Skywalker. But, and this is kind of like the beginnings of it. And who knows? Maybe this is how he started. I mean, there's a lot of speculation on what is Palpatine actually doing at this time period.
Well, I mean, Palpatine's dead. But, no, I think, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I think Baby Yoda is kind of like, I think he's the key to a lot of different things simply because, one, he was like the big secret of season 1.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Mandalorian has formed this attachment, so he's protecting this child because he feels like there's an obligation or a duty to protect this innocent baby. Then once he realizes, okay, what this baby can do, he's kind of like, well, maybe this is why I see why everybody's after this thing now. But why?
Yeah.
But then when you bring up Palpatine's grand plan, it's like, okay, if Palpatine kind of already had this whole thing in place, which seems to be where, okay, if he died or something like that, his spirit would be put into like another body or something to that effect.
Yeah, and then who prepared the body? It's like,
my thing is, like, you probably would need something like outside of alchemy that they've been using to kind of awaken Palpatine.
Which could be the Baby Yoda connection. So
now you need something as powerful. Like I said, remember how powerful Palpatine was. So you got another creature. Remember, Yoda was his equal.
All right, so
now you could use that.
Yeah.
The life force in Baby Yoda, which is a young. So you also got to think about it too. He's young, so it's like rich, like it's a rich young power.
Sure, but here's the thing that's really interesting when you try to factor all this stuff in. So there's 30 years between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the 5-year mark, so there's 25 years between The Mandalorian and The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in that time, Palpatine has to have survived and done something to where he can create Snoke.
Mm-hmm.
And then Snoke comes out, creates the First Order somehow, or somehow it's created before that. Right now, even in 5 years in, we're still kind of in the remnants of the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
The old Empire still exists. The First Order hasn't come into things yet. So it's really interesting to see when you put this in the context of Palpatine's plan, where does Palpatine actually start to initiate his plan?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a valid point.
Because that's the key to it.
Well, yeah, and here's another big thing that, if you really look at it, they keep saying in all these different articles, and it just dawned on me, actually, is that, okay, you have the fall of the Empire, but the New Republic is running the galaxy at this point.
Right.
So how did you, like you said, where does Snoke, because if the New Republic is on the ascend to pretty much like take over and Luke was building his whole thing, well, where did the First Order come from and how were they assembled so quickly, almost so quickly, and so, because they were vast. Like the First Order was a mass, because you had Starkiller Base, they had all these ships flying around, you had all these troopers, so like, okay, we just got rid of the old troopers, but now these new troopers, now you got Finn and, everybody else. Like, okay, how did the First Order take over from the New Republic?
Right, because remember that Finn, now we don't know how, well, we know he's human, right? So,
right.
How old would you say Finn is in Star Wars?
Well, Force Awakens, he's probably, I'll probably put him anywhere between 22, 25.
Yeah, well, okay. So you go backwards. Now he's born around the time of the Mandalorian.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And then he was kidnapped as a kid, which means that either he was a stormtrooper in the Empire before it switched to the First Order, or the First Order really comes to fruition quickly. Now, you can also look at it like, and this is, of course, is a criticism that people have of The Rise of Skywalker, but I mean, we know that Palpatine could do things pretty quickly because he has his entire Final Order fleet, the Sith fleet, just
hanging out in Exegol.
Yeah, and it's like, well, where do they all come from? So.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, see, to me, that's the big, that's even, bigger mission. I think we're going to find that out probably around season 4.
Well, this is something that people have said from the beginning of season 1. And I think even Favreau and Filoni kind of alluded to it. People have written about it, that you're going to find out once The Rise of Skywalker came out. It's like, okay, you have the sequel trilogy now complete.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find out a lot of the seeds of this stuff in The Mandalorian, like during its run. Maybe not in season 2, but
however long it goes.
Yeah, however long it goes, you're going to start to actually see some things pop out that will shed light on this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because you have to, because like you said, what's Palpatine's ultimate plan? Because it seems like, the moment he's been gone, of course, the Empire is still trying to hold on to what other remnants they have. Some planets still, because they were so downtrodden by the Empire, they're just too weak to fight back at this point. At least at this point. Some people were able to kind of like, all right, well, Empire's gone. Cool, let's go back. And so like now you have, someone like Moth Gideon, who's obviously trying to either get control for himself or for someone else. And, you have to ask that question because like, all right, yeah, where does Snoke come from? Because the First Order, we don't know when they began.
That's it.
And because we know the
or
first...
how.
Oh, how. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then how did Snoke become leader or his supreme leader? Because, when we first, meet everybody in Force Awakens, we already know, okay, well, yeah, Snoke, he, got into Kylo's head Ben's head and turned him to Kylo Ren and all this stuff. And, so it's like, okay, they already knew who Snoke was. Snoke was already established as a supreme leader. They already had Starkiller Base. They already had, these fleets of ships and stuff like that. I mean, like you had like the Dreadnought and all these other ships that they're like, so it was like, okay, well, who's financing this stuff? Because one, the New Republic right now in Mandalorian, the New Republic is on the rise and pretty much taking back the galaxy, along with Luke and his new band of merry men and women trying to, so at what point did all that just get wiped out and how? And so, it seemed quickly.
Or like a transfer of power, because it's kind of like you said, they're still running around with the old stormtrooper. Like, it's like the Empire, they're definitely scattered and it's the remnants and they're all doing this whole power struggle, which of course tracks in the novels too. The new canon novels are kind of doing the same thing.
Now, I could see if Palpatine did another, played the same trick again, because if you got to think about it, like, so when he was Senator Palpatine, Leia and Luke weren't even born yet.
Mm-hmm.
So when he was masterminding this whole takeover, right? So what if the New Republic, and Palpatine probably knows this, like, okay, if something happens to me and I die, of course, they're probably going to try to bring the New Republic back. Well, I have to find a way to get into the New Republic and turn that into the new Empire or the new First Order. So maybe that's kind of what happened, is that somewhere in the political game, there was a coup where someone is like, all right, maybe it was Snoke. He kind of started off as like the nice, gentle Palpatine kind of guy. And then once he was able to switch to his true intentions, maybe that's what happened.
I don't think so, because the New Republic still existed at the time of the First Order. What I think is more than likely is when you said
the Resistance.
No, the Resistance split off from the New Republic.
Oh, right, because Ahazian Prime was the...
Yeah, it was still the New Republic capital. The New Republic, Leia actually had a falling out, that's why they became the Resistance, but the New Republic still was very much in power and very much in existence. It's just that they didn't... they called Leia eventually like kind of a warmonger and just thought that that's all that, she cared about and stuff like that. So that's why they ended up forming the Resistance. So that I don't think is likely. What I think is likely, though, you're kind of on the right track to me, though, when you said pulling the same trick. I just think you're in the wrong time period. I think he was pulling the same trick as what he did in The Rise of Skywalker. See, while the Empire or the remnants of the Empire are all vying for power, he's out there secretly creating the First Order.
You mean The Force Awakens?
Well, before The Force Awakens. So, like, during the time of The Mandalorian and beyond, you have the Empire. Palpatine's gone. So now you have all these Grand Admirals, Grand Moffs. All these guys are, different gangsters that might actually have, like, a little, almost like Werner Herzog's character, where it's kind of like they're, like, okay, they were an Empire detachment or something maybe that was left on a planet. So now they're going to try to control that planet or that city or whatever it is. So they're doing all this stuff. They're vying for power. They're trying to figure out who's going to be the next head of the Empire. While they're doing that, Palpatine's out there. He creates Snoke. He does all this stuff. He's building the First Order. Then the First Order comes in and probably just wipes out the last remnants of the Empire or recruits them. Because you also have to look at from the standpoint of, they've got new armor, they got new TIE fighters, they got new everything. So at some point, and that would make the most sense. And then Palpatine tries to do that again, but it goes from the First Order to the Final Order. So while Kylo and all these guys are running around doing the First Order, secretly the Final Order is being created. And now you got all these Sith troopers, Sith Star Destroyers, all this other stuff. And it's kind of like, okay, you can join me and command this, or you can go up against me and I'm going to wipe you and your First Order out. So it'll be really interesting to see because they almost, if they hadn't created The Mandalorian at all and they just left it at the sequel trilogy, you could get away with some of this stuff because there's like 30 years.
Right.
But once you start to now go back the other way and now you're building back up the lore again.
And you're pushing closer to.
Yeah, you got to connect the two.
Yeah.
That's
true.
So, but what do you guys think? Do you guys think that, well, about any of this stuff we've been talking about, really, I mean, what do you guys think in general about the overall tone of season 2 and all this other stuff? Because, leave it in the comment section, or I'm sure we're still chatting, so you can chat with us or whatever. But now we come to the point of where we're getting to a little bit of the drama on the set now.
Yeah.
So at first, there was all these rumors popping up that there was some big blow up because Pedro Pascal decided he wanted to be out of the suit more.
He wanted his helmet off.
Yeah, he wanted his helmet off. And of course, basically Favreau and Filoni were like, dude, you kind of knew what you signed on for.
You're the Mandalorian. You kind of have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of part of the gig, buddy.
And so there was a big blow up and he was told to leave the set or he walked off. Depends on what you're reading. Okay, so now it's starting to look like, at first they were doing some damage control, like, no, he's still in it and all this other stuff. Now there's articles coming out that's saying that he's only going to provide voice work, that he's not going to be in the suit, he's not going to... And honestly, that doesn't bother me that much. As long as he does the voice, I don't care, because we found out that for 80% of season 1, it wasn't him in the suit.
Right.
He was just doing the voice. Okay, if they make that official and he's not in the suit at all for season 2, I'm good with it.
Yeah. So I'm, because that story is constantly changing.
Oh, I mean, daily.
Like daily.
It's funny because we're recording this on Thursday night. It's going to go out on Friday night, and I'm sure by the time this thing is actually premiering on YouTube, there's going to be even more stuff. And there's a lot more videos. That's one of the reasons, like I said, why we actually wanted to do a Mandalorian Season 2 centric episode, because honestly, there's just so much stuff coming out on a daily basis. And there's a lot of stuff that we haven't really talked about. And then on top of that, you got all these High Republic stories that are starting to come out now. So this is a really interesting thing. It's almost like, we need to actually go live like a couple of days a week just to keep up with all this stuff.
So apparently one of his body doubles is John Wayne's grandson.
Really?
Brendan Wayne.
Wow, dude. I did not know that. I
Yeah.
mean, I knew that, and don't get me wrong, I knew that John Wayne's grandson was out there and that he was in the business and stuff, but I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Especially since this is kind of like almost like a Western
anyway.
version.
Yeah, I know, right?
There's like,
like,
something,
well,
there's something kind of fitting about that, actually.
Exactly.
We're into all kinds of stuff.
That's what I'm saying. Like all this stuff, this information just kind of comes out. This only came out like a day ago.
Yeah, and see, exactly. It came out a day ago. And it's like I haven't really had a chance to hop on to see what today's latest stuff is. Which, of course, by the way, when this thing airs Friday night, you could say the same thing because I'm probably not going to be able to keep up with all this stuff. I mean, it just seems like something new is coming out about The Mandalorian every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's and if he's just reduced to the voice, that's fine with me. I mean, I'm okay with that. I mean, I think because I mean, you're more impressed with just the man in the suit anyway. It's it's kind of like the Vader thing.
Exactly. Even though I will say,
I mean,
David Prowse.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like David Prowse's portrayal or his acting ability within the suit is.
Yeah, I would actually say that David Prowse as Vader is more important than, say, whoever is a Mandalorian. Or even as, well, he's not with us anymore, but Jeremy Bulloch, who was the original Boba Fett. I mean, there's something about what David Prowse did with Vader that defined Vader.
Yeah, I mean,
in a way that wasn't like this other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Vader is such the iconic villain, and he's just it's just his presence.
Well, I think a lot of it too, like the way he walked, the way he carried him. There was just something defining about David Prowse's performance.
Yeah.
That I think that if he had portrayed another character, it would have been the same kind of a deal. It's what? It's a lot like Peter Mayhew's performance of Chewbacca. Because even though, and we can never pronounce that guy's name.
Oh, Sebastian.
No. That's the guy that was in Vader, Sebastian Shaw. He was the guy that was the, help me take this mask off.
Yeah.
And, he was kind of the kindly old Anakin. No. The guy that plays Chewbacca now. I can and his name is really hard to pronounce. But that guy, you can tell that it's not Peter Mayhew. Because Peter Mayhew was another one, a lot like David Prowse. He brought something to that character that actually defined him.
Eunice Sumato.
Yeah, it's like
Sumato.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah, I don't have.
You're gonna be wrong.
Yeah, it's like trying to pronounce Thrawn's name.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like one of those things where it's just like, I just
don't have it.
New Chewbacca, new Chewie. But I mean, and again, don't get me wrong, the guy does a fantastic job, and he was really good. And of course, Peter Mayhew gave him his blessing because Peter Mayhew did a couple of scenes.
And he kind of gave him that was the cool thing about you actually had the actual guy teaching you how to play that role,
right,
and what to do and how to look and the mannerisms.
And he's good, man. I mean, if that guy's Chewbacca from now on,
I'm okay.
I'm good with it. But at the same time, you could tell the difference. And it's the same thing with all these people that are in the Vader suit now. You could tell that it's not David Prowse.
Definitely.
And there's just something they brought to the character that, quite frankly, Pedro Pascal just doesn't have that same effect. Now, with his voice acting, he does.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually accept another guy in the suit more than I would another voice.
Yeah, I mean, his voice is almost kind of like...
I mean, anybody could probably imitate it close enough, but...
Yeah, I mean, but it's kind of like not a John Wayne, but Clint Eastwood.
Yeah,
kind of
exactly,
vibe.
Right. But I mean...
Do you feel lucky, punk?
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
has that...
exactly. There's something about it that's kind of cool, and there's definitely some cool acting with it, and I think that he does a really good job of matching the guy in the suit's like mannerisms and stuff, it's almost like you do believe that voice is coming from that person.
True.
So I mean, I'm not necessarily going to be that broken up if, it's not Pedro in the suit. But I do hope he keeps doing the voice, even though the show would go on if he was just completely off the show, but still. But, that brings just to a bigger, kind of a bigger thing, is that Star Wars just can't seem to escape drama.
Yeah.
I mean, The Mandalorian was kind of the exception to the rule. Yeah, it was like the golden child of the whole thing. It was like, this is Star Wars when it works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little disheartening to me to learn that maybe not everything is great. Now, again, I mean, if this is all it is, hey, I want to have my helmet off more, I really still wouldn't say it's a toxic set environment. I mean, I would just say that it's an actor that thought that he was signing on for one thing and decided, you know what, kind of like that scene where the helmet was off.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to do more of that in the second season and have the other guys go, no, dude, you can't. It's not how this whole thing works.
Yeah.
But there are sometimes these rumors that pop up from time to time that not all is harmonious on the Mandalorian set. And I really hope that that's not the case, because I think that the goodwill of that show and the relationships between the actors and everything, I think, is a big reason why it's successful.
True, and I think it's really the writers and the directors. I think that's honestly was really, like I said, just watching that Star Wars gallery thing. It was,
yeah, that's what really did it for me.
Yeah, it did it for me, because when you sat there and you actually can just, now everybody's can kind of just talk about what this was like and the process that they went through and getting into the characters, especially listening to veteran actors like Carl Weathers, who is pretty much retired from acting.
Yeah.
And then, it was like, oh, okay, when we going to play this? And he's thinking, all right, maybe an episode or two and I'm dead or something like that. But no, he's like, oh, I didn't expect to be like this kind of a
and I mean,
focal character.
I really think it's so much fun and so cool that they got him back into acting. It's very much the same way The Irishman got Joe Pesci back into acting.
Yeah, and it was crazy just to see that, like, man, like, whoever thought, like, oh, you'll see Apollo Creed in a Star Wars movie. It was just weird. It's almost like seeing, like, Schwarzenegger, like, in a, like, how I felt like seeing Schwarzenegger in the Batman movie. Like, what? It's like, just
once, I really wanted to go into The Mandalorian and be like, it's all in the hips.
Start playing Eye of the Tiger.
I mean, it's just like that Happy Gilmore character that he does.
Oh,
I keep
yeah.
forgetting the name of the character, but it's just like, that was so brilliant. And don't forget, his performance is, I can't remember the character's name in Predator that he plays. Dylan. Yeah. He's actually had some very memorable characters.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, it was so funny because there was talk of him actually appearing in one of the Creed movies.
Yeah.
It's almost like either a flashback or, everybody almost joked it was like a Force ghost. That it's kind of like how how Burgess Meredith popped up in Rocky V or something like that. And it was kind of like Force Ghost Mickey, and it's almost like how Carl Weathers is going to be as Apollo, but then he turns around, he's actually in a Star Wars thing. Yeah. Which made that reference even funnier.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's good. I mean, he's really good in that role.
He's really good, and he's, in a way, what's funny is I've always thought that he and Billy Dee Williams were related.
I could see that.
Just because they both kind of have that look and that kind of,
they do that
70s kind of swag to them, and like I could see him being like the new Lando almost. So,
and I mean, he's got some of the classic lines in the show too. That whole like, do the magic hands.
Oh yeah,
that was like one of the funny when he whipped that out. I did not expect.
Yeah,
that
I erupted
line.
in laughter when I saw.
I was just like roaring in laughter. It was just so funny to me, man.
I saw one who said, "There is no tomorrow."
Exactly.
But
I mean, and we can make the Rocky references all
day. Yeah. Well, yeah. I honestly though, but I like even the other characters, like because I honestly didn't expect to see Gina Carano honestly beyond this. I mean, I think she was cool, but because we didn't see a whole lot of her in season 1. I kind of figured like that arc was kind of over and they've moved on. But to see that she's
I was kind of
back,
glad because I
mean, I liked her character.
Her Grief Karga. I mean, I really liked that dynamic of that team, and I agree with you. I thought that it was going to be kind of maybe a 1 or 2. I was actually surprised when she popped up in another episode. I thought she was just going to be in that one single episode, and then there was like a one and done kind of thing, and that was it.
Yeah, and the fact, I mean, but I feel like her background is of such that you could definitely use her.
Mm-hmm.
In a myriad of situations. And I think it kind of makes, like you said, like a good team. Like, you got Grief, Mando, Kara, and then, of course, cute Baby Yoda.
I was kind of bummed that they killed off IG-11, to be honest.
Yeah, it was kind of cool, especially after he got reprogrammed.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. When he was reprogrammed, I'm like, now these guys are kind of like a... And I also thought it was sort of cool because him hating droids the way he did because of his whole Clone Wars experiences. Yeah. I just think that there was more they could have milked. I mean, they did do it a little bit in that episode, but I think that him developing this understanding and almost this friendship and loyalty to this droid.
Yeah, the fact that he's trying to save him at the end, especially that was kind of, and it was the fact that this whole droid kind of gave this whole kind of touching humanistic kind of thing where he sacrificed himself. It's like, no, I'll do it. And you see, Din Djarin kind of like have a change of heart of stuff, and it was just like, wow, you didn't see that coming.
No, in fact, to me it mirrored the whole K2SO.
Yeah, it did.
It was very much that same kind of deal, which at first I thought was a little cheap.
And it was kind of funny because Din Djarin Pedro Pascal kind of does look like Diego Luna.
I know, exactly. I mean, there is a little bit of a similarity in the situation and in the characters themselves, honestly. So I just think that was I thought that was a nice touch. And I thought that he was a valuable member of the team, and I think that they could have done some, a little bit more dynamics between this guy that hated droids and this reprogrammed droid, and there was just a little bit more story there. But again, I didn't think it was a show killer that they got rid of him. I'm just saying that I think that they could have done some more. Yeah,
it kind of reminded me of that whole group that they had of bounty hunters went on Clone Wars when it was like Boba, Bosk, Aura Singh.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like they kind of were like their own little A-team almost.
Yep.
And that's kind of, you could kind of see that with this batch. Like they could be almost like an A-team.
Yeah, or almost like the new version of the Bad Batch, which we beat again.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they were actually...
And we're actually supposed to get them next year, a few months.
Really?
No, the new...
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's a new animated series.
Yep.
Yeah, see, so I mean, there's a lot of that going around. Man, I almost forgot about that series. Well, I mean, there's just so much stuff that's coming out.
Yeah.
There's all kinds, and I'm sure we'll cover this next week too when we're live, but they've actually are moving more forward, I think, with the whole
High Republic.
Well, not just the High Republic, but the Cassian Andor series too.
Mm.
So both of those. There's starting to be a new story cycle that's coming out for both of those. And so I think it's going to be interesting. I actually just read not too long ago, a few days ago, in fact, the latest Darth Vader comic and the latest Star Wars comic. I'm telling you, man, I mean, these are really good stories that are furthering the canon in ways that is just refreshing. I think would probably be the best word for it.
Gotcha.
So I mean, let us know what you guys are thinking. I mean, first of all, what are you guys thinking about The Mandalorian Season 2? Overall thoughts on maybe the episode time. What about Ahsoka? What about Boba Fett? What about Pedro Pascal? And I mean, do you guys think that he's important? I mean, we've covered so much stuff in this hour and a half, basically.
Yeah, we probably still could go on.
We could easily go on. And who knows? We might be like heading into this like really deep chat territory. Who knows? It's really hard to say what goes on with these premieres because a lot of times it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty fun. Yep. You guys are actually a lot of fun. But I think right now We're not going to totally cheat you guys on everything that we do live. Next, we're going to do probably my favorite segment.
Yeah.
It still is. Even though I have been enjoying, don't get me wrong, I've been really enjoying this. It's time to move on. Little segment we call Clear Your Mind. That's right. This is where we answer your questions. So every week, we select 2 questions that we answer on our show and that have been submitted to us through our social media. You can hit us at headtoheadsw on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you have a question, send the question in there. Of course, you can also put it in the comments section on any of our videos. And if it's interesting enough, we'll deal with it. So what is our first question?
The first question is from Will Newart, and his question is, where did Darth Vader go after the first Death Star was destroyed in A New Hope?
Well, it depends. If you listen to Robot Chicken, he makes a little call to his old buddy Palpatine, which goes somewhat well and somewhat not so well. There's actually a canonical explanation. I'm trying to remember, though, if it was more the old canon or new. I'm pretty sure it was new, though, because I think it was covered in a comic. He ended up going back. So we see him, he's spinning around, and he's kind of like out in the middle of nowhere. And I remember as a kid, when I first saw that scene, I'm like, what's he going to do? Because at the time you figured the Death Star is destroyed, you were actually led with the impression that the entire fleet had just been destroyed.
Yeah.
And as a kid, I'm thinking, man, this guy, he's just like in this single TIE fighter. Where's he going to go?
Yeah, and Obi-Wan made mention of it earlier. It's like they're short-range fighters. They're not designed to, go long distances.
So the truth is, he ended up getting, it was a newer canon explanation. He ended up getting picked up by a Star Destroyer. It wasn't the...
Executor.
Yeah, it wasn't that one. Wasn't his flagship, because he didn't have that one yet. The Executor was the first Super Star Destroyer. This one was kind of like a precursor to that. I forgot what it was called. And he was actually, for a time, demoted. It was, which admiral was it? It was one of the guys, Mahdi, I think it was. Or was he the one that was choked?
I think Mahdi was the one that was choked.
Yeah, Mahdi was the one that was choked. It was one of the other guys from around the table that did end up getting killed, but the Emperor put him temporarily in charge of the military in order to punish Vader, basically. And so Vader kind of had to answer to him a little bit, similar thing to like Tarkin was.
Mm-hmm.
So that went on for a little while, and then he ended up failing or something. I don't remember if Vader killed him or if he just ended up getting killed, but that's when Vader kind of just like ended up taking over, not necessarily with the Emperor's permission, mind you. He ended up just kind of taking over the Empire. It was interesting. But actually, that was a good question, because there's a whole lot to that. And there is, I don't remember which comic it is offhand. I apologize for that. Usually I'm pretty good with that stuff, but I do remember reading it, and it was cool.
Yeah, they said in Legends, Vader crash landed on the planet Val. And the only Imperial presence on the planet was a small Imperial communications outpost that was led by lackadaisical Sergeant Rabin and 2 other men. They preferred to relax and have fun rather than doing actual work, reasoning that they were like on one of the Empire's most distant outposts. But meanwhile, Vader encountered a pack of hyenas, vicious canine creatures that I guess they're kind of like hyenas.
Yeah, lazy writing.
I know, right?
Really?
That attempt to kill him. But after slaying the pack leader, Vader was regarded as the new leader by the Hounds. He helped them kill a large horned creature when they walked, and then walked them to the Imperial outpost. With the pack following, the outpost crew was shocked to see Vader suddenly suddenly arrived and stood petrified as they watched him enter. And then, as Vader blasted off, the Hounds killed the crew. And then Vader later arrived on Coruscant, having informed the commander that the communications outpost on Val needed a new crew. That sounds like something Vader would do.
Mm-hmm.
And then he asked for the Executor to come, like, retrieve him, and then he kind of came back. So that's that answer.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that I think is actually a really cool thing. When you start getting into, and I was really glad that a lot of the comics and everything started to fill in some of those blanks, because
Yeah, I mean that's good.
kind of a big thing. Because if you think about it, we last see him by himself, like spinning around in some TIE fighter or whatever, and then Empire opens up, and here he is, like commanding this giant fleet again, and it's. If you really stop and think about it, it's like, well, how did the Empire recover from the loss of the Death Star and become this again?
Yeah, and how did he get back there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's good that they kind of fill in the blanks, and I'm glad that they're doing it in the new canon too, because they obviously answered a lot of this stuff in Legends, but now it's not official, so they had to come up with some more official stuff. And the comics are a great way to do that. Okay, who's next?
The next question comes from Allison Schultz. Her question is, why didn't they change Luke's last name like they did Leia? It would have made it harder for Vader and the Emperor to make the connection that Luke was Vader's son.
Yeah, there was actually a recent thing about it. I haven't had a chance to really read it yet, but that was a big thing. Number one.
Well, I know Leia just because she was adopted.
Yeah, she was adopted. It wasn't like they changed her name to protect. I mean, I guess that's kind of a.
But they kind of Bail. If you remember the end of Revenge of the Sith, Bail Organa said like, we'll take the girl with us. We've always wanted to have a girl. I guess they couldn't, or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
So we just kind of adopt her, and that's how she got the princess title anyway. And then that's kind of how, of course, she went by the last name Organa because those were her adoptive parents. So they were made to believe it was basically under the disguise that like they had a kid.
Yeah, and you have to remember that they put Luke on Tatooine. It's not like the Empire is going to be aware that, this guy Luke Skywalker running around. I mean, I think it would have been. I'll tell you where it would have been interesting is if Luke had actually been able to go to the Imperial Academy.
Oh.
Can you imagine a new student comes in named Luke Skywalker?
Well, see, I could raise him a couple eyebrows.
Yeah.
At least the old guard. But no, I mean, I understand the point though, because you got to think about it. Like the whole purpose of splitting them up is because at some point, one of them, I mean, we find out later that actually Yoda wanted Leia to be the one to go up against Vader. However, Luke became the chosen one. But yeah, I mean, if one of the kids are going to eventually have to confront Vader and everybody else, you think the name Skywalker is going to stick out.
Yeah, but I mean, being that he was on a planet that they knew Vader would never want to ever go back to, and the fact that
yes, as a kid, but I mean, eventually, like, okay, I guess if they're under the assumption that by the time that he confronts Vader, he's already a fully trained Jedi Knight.
That's what I'm thinking.
And he just flat out is ready.
Because the only other explanation would be Leia's the one they really want. Let him keep the name Skywalker so they kill him. He takes one for the team. While he's doing that, they train Leia, right? I mean, it's one of those things that I'm not sure if Lucas really thought through this or not, because don't forget.
Initially, he wasn't
Vader's son.
Eventually, his name wasn't even Skywalker.
Well, the very first draft. But
right.
When it became that, he was Anakin Skywalker's son. But Anakin Skywalker was not Darth Vader. Actually, the way that Obi-Wan had told it
was the actual truth
at that time, and then Lucas changed his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Hence why Luke and Leia ended up kissing, and then they're brother and sister. So then, for Return of the Jedi, he had to go back and make a lot of corrections, and I think that's when he wrote the whole Obi-Wan, it's from a certain point of view, and depending on how... I mean, that was actually a stroke of genius when you really stop and think that he was retconning the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the real reason. The real reason is that it wasn't a problem. It wasn't a problem until he wrote that in Empire Strikes Back, and then, you got this big glaring plot hole, but you could still kind of explain it away. And that actually, what you just said, is even better, because the idea is that by the time that Luke gets to the age to where he might start to go out a little bit more and people might be aware of his presence, he's a fully trained Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's probably where they were going.
Yeah, they probably didn't anticipate him going so soon, so to speak, or just being involved so soon.
Well, even my whole thing was the whole time that he's like talking about, yeah, I'm trying to go to the Imperial Academy. Now we know that Owen wasn't necessarily in contact with Ben because he didn't like him.
Right.
So he wasn't going to try to do anything. But it's like, if I were Obi-Wan, and if I had any thought that Luke was actually going to join the Empire, I'd be all over that.
Well, not even that, though. I mean, because if you honestly really think about it, this is one of the things, like, I mean, if you just try not to think about it, you have to remember it's science fantasy.
Yeah.
But if you really stop and think about it, like, for Yoda and Obi-Wan to be like these master Jedi who are like, brilliant, you see what they're able to do in the Clone Wars as strategists and everything like that. This is by far like one of the most boneheaded decisions. Like,
completely.
Because I'm thinking like this. All right. Obi-Wan is already like 94 years old. Luke Skywalker is already like 18, 19 years old. Now, at what point do you have time to train him to be ready? You don't know when you're going to die. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, like you said, I mean, what if he did up and join the academy? But my thing is like, if your whole Jedi principle was train them while they're young, so then that way, you can get away to fear and anger and all that type of stuff. My thing is like, okay, why don't you get a hold of him earlier? Even if you did it secretly, like, okay, I understand that you didn't want,
right.
Ben, Owen didn't want, Ben to kind of deal with him. But if you're supposed to be watching out for him,
well, first of all,
yeah, you might want to.
Obi-Wan was the one that gave him to Owen, so it's kind of like,
yeah,
I mean, Ben would have the final say, I would think. But I mean, even when you look at it from that standpoint, there's a lot of people that have made the argument, like, okay, look.
Why didn't just Ben keep him, honestly? Well,
yeah, there's that. But then there's also the whole idea that if he started training too early, then Palpatine might feel it in the Force or something. But my whole thing is like, well, that would be true at any point.
Yeah, at any point.
So I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that I think it's just, the more they keep expanding this story, the more that is going to be a pretty glaring plot hole. I think the best explanation is, number one, we really don't know how common the name is. But even if it's not, even if it's kind of a unique thing, right? Mm-hmm. He's on a really remote planet that hardly anybody goes to.
Yes, the Outer Rim. Vader hates it.
Vader hates it. Vader has no interest in it. It's one of hundreds and hundreds of planets. They actually do a really good job of outlining this in, what was I reading? I was reading something the other day where it's just like, wow. It really does put the whole thing into perspective that, people are like, well, how come, they don't find so-and-so or whatever? And it's like, do you realize how big this galaxy really is?
Yeah.
That, I mean, really, unless you did something to put yourself on the radar of the Empire, and especially like Vader, they're not going to know. I mean, Vader didn't even know who that was. The only reason why he knew who Luke was because this is the guy that blew up the Death Star, like this multi-trillion-dollar whatever it is.
The only reason why he knew who he was because Obi-Wan kept yapping at him.
Well, yeah.
Honestly, because, I mean, quite frankly...
Well, there's that, but, I mean, the reason why he pursued him, he didn't actually know who he was, and the latest Darth Vader comic series covers this, is that Vader's interest was, hey, I want to know more about this kid that blew up the Death Star.
Well, because he had the Force. That was the thing that triggered him in the beginning.
Right, but he didn't know who it was yet.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're Vader and like, okay, and that's what I'm saying, like, you wiped out pretty much most of the Jedi during your whole purge. Now all of a sudden, you're in this whole battle with a couple little, you're picking off like, rebels like left and right. And this is one you just can't seem to hit like that. And you're just starting to like, the Force is strong with this one. And it's like, okay, well, who the heck has the Force? First of all, that's this strong.
Now they cut to Luke. Now this is pod racing.
So, you kind of have to wonder like, okay, well, for someone to, okay, it's one thing to have the Force, but to be this strong.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a flag. And then, of course, after he blows up the Death Star initially,
that's
now
it.
It's like, okay, I really got to know who this guy is because Palpatine is asking, well, like you said on Robot Chicken, you let a bunch of teenagers, blow up the Death Star. Like, are you serious? Like, well, wait, no, this guy had the Force though.
Yeah, and that's it. It was the
And that's
guy
probably
had
what
the
made
Force.
that's probably what made
He was
Palpatine
really
calm
powerful.
down.
He ended up successfully blowing up the Death Star. It's like, okay, I got to find who this guy is. As soon as he finds out his name is Luke Skywalker, now he's on a mission to kill like everybody
Who knew about it?
And didn't,
Tell him.
pretty much. I mean, it's a really good comic series, especially because he's dealing with Dorme and all the
Handmaids.
the Nabooans or whatever they
Yeah.
call themselves.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that it's just a really good series. I mean, where it's coming, it's starting to come to an end, I think. I don't know how many more issues there are left. I mean, it's on like issue 6 or 7 or something, but it's really good. If you guys haven't read the latest Darth Vader series that's come out, it's really good. I highly recommend it. And soon I'm going to end up getting into the latest Thrawn novel that's coming out that I think is actually starting I don't know if they're going to do a trilogy on this one or not, but it basically is kind of like a prequel. It deals with him and, how he rose up to the Chiss and all that. It looks fascinating. So I have the book. I just, I have to finish a couple other books and read it. I know you still got to deal with Queen's Peril at some point. And, we'll probably do something to where we actually talk about some of the stuff we're reading. But
Yep.
I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up for this week. So like I said, if you guys like this video, hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button, subscribe to our channel to get even more Star Wars content. We're hoping to bring a lot more to you guys soon. Join us live every Friday at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And you can join us. You can chat with us live. We're always talking about a bunch of different Star Wars stuff. Of course, we cover a lot of the latest Star Wars news. You can hit us up at HeadToHeadSW on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And, of course, it's always my pleasure to talk to this guy right here about all things Star Wars. We're all looking forward to The Mandalorian coming up. Let us know in the comment section, or, you still probably have 30 seconds to chat with us on this one. But let us know what you guys are thinking, because there's so many different things that they're doing with not only The Mandalorian, but some of these other series that are coming out.
Yeah, I look forward to looking into the Cassian Andor and High Republic stuff.
And even the Bad Batch. I forgot all about that one.
Yep.
So until next week, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.